You're listening to Checking In, a self-help book club hosted by Adam and Amber, where we read self-help books each week and sit down to talk about them.
Disclaimer: the opinions recorded on this podcast are our own and do not reflect the authors mentioned here. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Checking In. How are you doing this afternoon, Amber? She's nodding. She's nodding for our radio listeners.
No, I'm doing good. Just, drinking my coffee. Nice vacation.
Yeah.
Nice and cozy.
This is just a couple of days after Christmas in the little dead zone between Christmas and New Year's where there's nothing that we have to do. I don't have either one of my kids today. And it's just really, really chill today, which is great because there's otherwise a lot going on.
Yeah.
And some of it is because of this book. Today's book is Come As You Are, written by Michael Azerrad. It's the Nirvana biography that was published in 1993. So
it took me
Nirvana was founded in 1987. They were signed to Sub Pop in 1989. And as we all know, Dave Grohl joined the classic power trio lineup in 1990 for their I'm getting a look here, so I'm going to stop this. Our book this week is Come As You Are, a different book by Emily Nagoski, Ph.D. And I looked at her bio online, and if you have never had a bio written for you or had to write your own, there's kind of like two different links. There's one is like the elevator pitch, which is going to be like 2 sentences, and then the other one's going to be like, here's everything that I've ever done, including the drawings I did when I was a toddler.
Mine, I think for both of mine, it'd be like, I'm here. What up?
Yeah, very, very be here now. But I'm going to pull one sentence from close to the end of Emily's bio, which I think is great, sums it up. Emily's mission in life is to teach women to live with confidence and joy inside their bodies. And
that's lovely.
Instead of reading y'all a synopsis of what this book is supposed to be about, I'm going to read y'all some praise.
Praise.
We're going to read some praise to get y'all into this book.
Yes, queen.
This is the best book I have ever read exploring the science of female sexuality. I'm a total evangelist for Nagoski's work. You think you know how women's sexuality works? I can guarantee that you do not. Not until you read this, anyway. The book is definitely great for college students and for bright high schoolers as well. And that's from Peggy Orenstein, the author of Girls and Sex. The next one is, this is the best book I have ever read about sexual desire and why some couples just stop having sex and what they can do about it. It's a must read by John Gottman, PhD.
Oh,
author of The 7 Principles.
Yeah. He's a guy who knows a thing or two.
Right. And also he's a guy.
Yeah. Period.
Yeah. Emily Nagoski has written one of the most important books about sex any woman or anybody else could ever pick up, full of insights that are both fascinating and deeply useful. I guarantee Come As You Are will open minds and change lives. And that is Carol Queen, PhD, founding director of the Center for Sex and Culture. And honestly, even though there is virtually zero mention of Kurt Cobain in this entire book, holy fuck. I think this is the best book that we've read. And this was supposed to be like, obviously a lot of these books are going to be, for anybody. Yeah. But this one was going to be one for the ladies.
Yeah. So this was one that I was assigned when I started with my sex therapist. She signed me a few, and we even spoke about it to our couples therapist this week, and she was like, yeah, I usually just kind of assign that one out of the get-go. I think it should be assigned reading for just anyone, to be honest.
I am doubling down on that. I kind of felt like I was going to be, the one dude in the witches circle. I was going to be, like the little boy listening into his mom's conversation with his mom's best friends. I was not outside of the circle ever at any point. All of this information directly pertains to me, any relationship I ever had or will have. It is, before you hear anything else about it, this is probably the most important book that we've had on our podcast so far.
And we both loved it, which was fun. And I said this when we first started, I'm usually pretty wary.
There we go.
Of anything that's going to tell me they're going to transform my life, Like, usually that is like a red flag for me. It's kind of Tony Robbins-ish for me. However, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed also how it's set up. Like how the chapters flow. At the end of each chapter, there's a TLDR, which I really liked.
Yeah. And when we were talking about how, like, gosh, this is kind of a long one, which, by the way, it does not feel like a long one. Yeah. It does not feel like a long, drawn-out book. As soon as we realized that there were, like, these little summaries, these little too long didn't reads at the end of each chapter, just in case... I think she says, like, hey, if you want to show your boyfriend or husband or lover, if they're not down for reading,
notes.
which, a lot of the idea is that guys are not going to want to sit down and read this, but they are.
Yeah.
If they're totally resistant to reading it, it's like, honey, just read this little bullet pointed thing at the end of each chapter.
Yeah.
And
if they
that
care.
works great.
And you also have the audiobook, which we listen to, and it's narrated by Emily, and she is a fantastic narrator.
If she had hired the perfect person to narrate this book, it still would have been her.
Yeah, like she's totally kind of TED Talk engaging, but very much like down to earth friendly. So it definitely felt really cool. Our sex therapist also pointed out to us that, if there is anybody who's just resistant to reading and audio booking, there is a series on Netflix that is a very watered down version of the book, but there are definitely some lines like directly lifted.
Yeah.
It's called The Principles of Pleasure, and Dr. Emily is featured. She's one of the interviewees.
You can probably just search for pleasure.
Yeah. I think I just typed in pleasure.
Yeah, and that's going to be like the bolded word on it.
So, and that's cool, like if you're just like doing a Netflix and chill, wink, 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 wink. There's 3 episodes.
Or Netflix and don't worry about chilling.
Yeah.
If it happens, it happens.
We still need to watch the last episode, but it was really cool.
So everybody learns in different ways, and I think that's half the reason why that Netflix series exists. Maybe you've even stumbled across it by accident or had it recommended to you, but I feel like just because I had absorbed most of the book by the time that we saw any of the episodes, look, it's a very well-produced show. It's perfect. But compared to the book, it's so watered down.
Yeah,
and it's got so many little interviews. And it's like, okay, so a lot of the purpose of this is we show these women talking about their bodies, talking about their experiences, and part of the charm of the show is us getting to know them and their personalities.
Right.
And
You're putting a face.
Just how cute these people are.
Yeah.
And just how rich characters they seem. But if that's important to you, please go for it.
Yeah.
But I was noticing a big slowdown in information compared to the book, which is a fucking fire hose.
Yeah.
There were a few times where I had to stop, back up, like hang on, because it's laid out perfectly.
Yeah.
It's laid out. It's like somebody wrote a whole book and finished it, and it was ready to go off to press, and then they sent it to an editor who is a genius themselves
Yeah.
and said, here's how we can lay this out. And if
Yeah.
Emily, if you're listening and you did essentially write 2 books in one, and I know that this is a revised edition, there were some changes that had to be made because of certain language after the first pressing, after the first printing. Emily, if you did that, I love you even more because you fucking nailed it.
Yeah. So, like me, were you totally surprised at some of the things you didn't know?
No, I knew everything that was in the book. I knew
Yes.
all of it. No, I'm fairly confident in my ability to like navigate women's sexual stuff. And no, I'm not. I don't know enough.
I mean, there are
I don't
times
have those parts, and I have never gone to a class about
Yeah.
this. Like Amber and I were talking about sex ed. Okay, so y'all remember how we're both from Alabama, right? So I had sex ed in 1989, and it had so much more information.
It was in black and white.
And it was because they hadn't invented color yet. They hadn't invented color information yet. Everybody was always fully clothed during sex back in those days, which was hot. No, I got like what I consider much closer to a real sex education than Amber got. Tell us about how it went for you by the time you had sex ed.
So you said you were in like the 5th grade.
Yeah.
So I was in, believe, the 10th grade because
We had it a couple times, to be fair.
So I had it once in the 10th grade because it was coupled with, so half the semester was driver's ed, half the semester was health, and then one class was sex ed. And like I had kind of told in previous episodes, it was a lot of your used Band-Aid, virginity is sacred, all
They
this.
were teaching
Yeah.
abstinence. That
Right.
wasn't a sex ed class. It was
Right.
an abstinence class.
It was, yeah, and they obviously, did a lot of like fear mongering with like pregnancy and then like trying to scare people with the STD factors instead of showing how to safely prevent these things.
Yeah. So instead of giving you information, they gave you deterrence.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally
is-
like 15, so.
Okay. So if that tells you anything about like something happened in Alabama between me being in 5th grade and her being in 10th grade.
I was in the 10th grade in like 2006.
Yeah. So
2007.
we went backwards pretty hard and pretty fast. So and here's where the problem is that my sex ed class was essentially a front and back pamphlet on what this book is about. And your sex ed class was not a pamphlet at all.
No.
So since I had sex ed back in the 20th century, there's been all sorts of research. We did not understand what a clitoris was.
Until like 2005?
2005 is when somebody finally mapped it out.
To learn that. I was so shocked to learn
So
that.
imagine you learned about this shit before that happened. Okay?
Yeah.
That means everything that you know, you know what you know. You need to get educated again.
Yeah.
And if you had sex ed and it was actually just scared straight, you still need to read this book. If you're a woman and you have never looked at yourself down there, you need to read this book. And if you're a guy
down there
that has ever downstairs, if you're a guy and you are into women, you definitely need to read this book.
I mean,
Like there's no two ways about it.
And straight up, like, Adam frankly shocks me with the things he knows about women's bodies, about my body, and I'll just leave it at that. I personally feel like I have a good hold on like my sexuality as far as, kind of functioning and how I've, created my sexuality throughout my life. and I still learned a lot of things that I feel like I have a good grasp on like how to pleasure myself or like what I like. You know what I mean?
And possibly even why.
Right. But like I think I still learned quite a bit. So just all to say like and I am definitely a millennial. Like I remember seeing depicted in this show me and my friends used to watch called Girls on HBO, Googling random sex questions throughout our entire young teenage adulthood. So I feel like me and Adam are pretty like well versed in our own sex lives, but still learned quite a bit.
As well versed as like say the average person.
Well, I don't know.
And I might be
I'm shocked.
I might be a little ahead of some guys because I'm the former co-owner of a doula business.
Okay, that is like a gross downplay here.
I give a shit and I know some things.
There are men who think
90% of this book was news to me.
There are men who think women like have to hold in their periods. Like, why do you have to wear a tampon? Can't you just hold it?
What?
There are men out there who believe things like this.
Wow.
So, I think you're downplaying.
Okay. I'm a goddamn genius, and y'all should all bow to me. And no. So we've just like breathlessly talked about how much we love Emily, and I mean like the production of the recording of the book is great.
Oh yeah, it's really good.
I mean, she's right down to like okay. So one final thing about how the book is laid out. I was worried at first that this was going to be one of these books, and I've griped about this before, that's like, I'll be talking about how you can transform your life. And they're talking about how they're going to transform your life right up until they pass the collection plate and it's over.
Right.
It's like, hang on, you never told me how to transform my life. This was a fucking ripoff.
Right.
And what she does is, I'm going to be talking about this. She talks about this. Mm-hmm. She involves like very specific, like real world examples. We've have like 4 or 5 people or couples throughout the book that we're kind of keeping tabs on. Mm-hmm. And she'll be like, remember so-and-so from chapter 4 and bring it back. But before she changes the subject, she will say like, so I've talked about this and in a moment I'm going to talk about this and how this relates to that. And, you could just lay out the information in a thoughtful way and we would come along. Mm-hmm. But there's just a little extra, I don't want to use the term hand-holding, but there's just like this little extra narrative thread that helps your brain to be able to hang on to the information and categorize it appropriately as she goes along. So that even somebody like me who's like, wait, what? Constantly.
Yeah. That's a really good way of
describing
it. Yeah. I think
so. All right. First whole part of the book. I'm just looking at the table of contents here, honestly. And we're just going to touch on a few things.
Yeah.
Because this is a thick book and the whole thing is great. And we're giving it 100 A+. So you absolutely need to get this. But the first part of the book is, yes, you are normal.
Yeah.
Which... what a way to start a book where, let's say somebody's handed this to you or recommended it and you're like, I don't want to find out some things that are going to upset me. Speaking of, from here on out, there may be a trigger or two. So like mild to moderate trigger warning.
Yeah, she definitely is, talks about shame, trauma, sexual assault. So just be mindful of those things.
So can you recall some of the things that she was talking about? Like, hey, this is normal. I know that for one thing, and this is kind of mind-blowing, but women are generally ashamed of like the I'm going to, for the first and probably last time in this episode, refer to the vagina as the whole thing down there, which she goes very, she educates us. And it's like, well, I mean, part of that is the vagina.
It's the vulva.
Yeah. So a lot of women feel shame about their vulva. And
You didn't know that?
well, I mean, I suppose that like we're meant to feel shame about anything having to do with sex.
Right.
So why would I differentiate? Like
Yeah.
obviously I'm supposed to feel shame about, the when I was like 3 years old or whatever, and that neighbor girl asked to see my penis. I was like made to feel shame about it afterwards. So obviously what I did something shameful. So that obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously that we're
Well,
supposed to feel
and
shame
I'm just
about
talking
that.
more about like a lot of women are, yes, we deal with a lot of shame, especially I think it's an American kind of phenomenon, but a lot of women don't like the way it aesthetically looks, which is really sad.
Why do you feel like that is?
I mean, because I think there is a lot of portrayal of, as weirdly sex repressed as this country is, there's a lot of really strange portrayals of sex in the media, in porn, in, any kind of pictures you see, or even, like seeing friends and peers or sexual partners who happen to have the same parts as you. They all look different. And I think people grow up seeing like maybe theirs and their mom's,
Oh gosh.
and they think, it's one way, but then,
So in that context, something really just clicked for me.
Yeah.
That I didn't really grasp until I had a son who was old enough to be in school and be able to get bullied. So him coming home and telling me like the ugly things that kids would say to him and about him, I realized like I got bullied a lot when I was a kid, more than him. And I realized children are just playing a game where they're pointing out differences from the mean.
oh, yeah.
Like in things that deviate far at all, no matter how small, things that deviate from like the absolute center line of normal get pointed out.
Oh, kids will clown on you for anything.
Kids will clown
Like,
on you for
straight
anything. This
up.
kind of seems
They'll
like
be
a
like,
continuation
nice
of that.
shoes, Miss Amber. And I'm like,
so
what?
yeah.
What?
I got called a butt chin one time because I have a cleft chin, and everybody on the school bus was laughing and pointing at me. And I came home crying, and mom was like, Adam, that's like women like that. And she had an impossible time convincing me of that.
I mean, I got bullied for having big boobs and a big butt.
Yeah, dumbass.
Yeah, like, what? Like, I got bullied for those two things, which, I mean, a lot of men claim to like.
Yeah.
My question
No,
throughout,
we're joking.
My question throughout my life in the last, like, decade or so is, do straight men like women? Question mark.
I think
I really don't think they do a lot of the time.
I think most men like straight women, and since meeting you, I see your point.
But I also got bullied for having hairiness. So yeah, I would walk through the halls. And it was mainly guys, but they would always be like, I would walk into class and they'd be like,
Are these guys that maybe felt self-conscious about not having hair on their arms
maybe
yet?
Maybe they didn't have a nice hairy mustache like I did.
Well, I'm here to tell you there's such a thing as late bloomers. I didn't have any facial hair really until I was a year or two into college.
Oh yeah, me and my mom used to like roast my brother Carson all the time when he was younger. Be like, we have thicker mustaches than you.
Yeah, so like roasting him because he's quote behind.
Yeah.
But people also get roasted for
But
being ahead.
You've seen this young man recently. He's hairy. Like he totally got hairy like very quickly.
Yeah, he definitely figured out how to grow facial hair.
Right.
He had just been holding it this whole time.
He was just waiting. He's not listening to this, so let's roast him all day.
We are not embarrassing him. Okay, so pardon me. So in that chapter on like, yes, you were normal wraps up with just the idea of like, if you feel broken or know someone who does, again, we're just talking about like how there is quite a bit of variety. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of variety not only from men to women, like comparing the two, but also there's more variety among women.
Yeah, for sure. And so
Everyone is so different just in terms of all of the things we're about to talk about.
So I walked into a sex therapist office because I felt not normal for a long, long time. And while me personally, as Amber, can't say that this book helped me feel normal, I can say that it definitely helped me feel not alone, but it also helped me kind of celebrate the strengths, of being, a little abnormal, a little atypical.
Not abnormal or atypical, but you're high on the scale. Mm-hmm. You're not off the scale.
I know.
You're not off the chart, but just in terms of like, how does she put it? Just in terms of like wanting sex. What did she call that? Desire?
So my sex therapist, which Emily talks about in this book, your brakes and your accelerator.
Yeah.
So like it comparative to a car, because we love, a queen who compares women to cars.
Do the whole brakes and accelerator thing, because this is a big deal in the book that comes up every few pages. Go ahead.
Yeah. So your brakes are things that can happen. So she'll kind of break the brakes down into your foot brake and your hand brake, because there are brakes that are external, right? So, and this is all related to your sex drive, so to speak. So if you have external brakes, like some people like can't concentrate on sex or even other tasks if their room's messy, or you've got dogs or pets, babies crying, you've got kids. There's, things to do, things to cook, things to clean. Those are kind of external stressors. Oh, yeah, you've had like a stressful time at work lately, or you got in a fight with your friend or your mom. Like these are kind of external stressors that are going to really pump the brakes on a lot of women's sex drives. An internal brake, or like a hand brake, is internal stressors. So it's like that are going to pump the brakes on your sex drive as well. So it's like feelings of inadequacy, huge. Like feelings like I don't like my boobs, or, I don't like how I look, or I, need to put on makeup and shower and, have this outfit.
This is like, it could be thoughts like, I need to pause sex to go shower.
Yeah.
Or like, I can't concentrate on, I can't have an orgasm because I'm concerned about how I look.
Right. Yeah. And so you're worried about, how you're perceived. That's an internal brake. These are things that are, if you are aroused and you are like in the mood, or if you've got like a date night planned with your partner,
would be. These
are things that like you're kind of diminishing, like pile on one by one. Your accelerator, on the opposite of that, are things that really make it nice, really get you worked up. Like things like if, your significant other touches you, or if they have like a really nice date planned, or if they text you throughout the day how they can't wait to see you, and, maybe some pictures or things like that.
Yeah, this is just like, by the way, guys, just start out with dick pics and just send dick pics all day.
No.
Indiscriminately, doesn't matter. Send them to your mom.
No.
Everybody. No, guys, don't do that. I'm sorry.
No.
Just making a joke.
Yes.
But so all of that is going to be pleasure based.
Yeah.
And nobody is going to be like, I'm really looking forward to sex with this person, which is always awful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and there's since there is no pleasure there, there's no way that you're just going to be like, I magically like sex now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to this mediocre to traumatizing thing.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But if it's like, hey, let's see what this does. I'm going to give you a shoulder massage later and kiss your neck. Like, there is no way that it's, that's going to put you in the mind of like, hey, that sounds like that's going to feel good.
Yeah.
I'm going to like that.
Yeah.
I'm down for doing that. There's not going to be like breaks in the way of that initial like, pleasure impulse. However, if it's like, but also I need to tell you that, my mom said that you and I are not going to be able to go on vacation by ourselves. She has to come with us and stay in the same room with us. That's going to be
What?
What? Exactly. That's hang on. Pleasure is going to have to take a back seat. You said something? So that would be accelerator and brakes.
Yeah.
And I hope that made it like a visceral thing for y'all.
And, my sex therapist, when I, told her how abnormal and shameful sometimes I feel, obviously a lot of that is linked to the religious trauma and the shame women experience, but she was just like, you're kind of all gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
And I'm like...
The book mentions several times that, like, there's no way that you could be angry at your partner and still want sex. And I hear Amber every time something like that's mentioned make a noise like,
I mean, I don't know necessarily.
Yeah. So that's an illustration of, like, you're pretty far over on the spectrum there, but you're not off of it.
You could definitely earn some points if I'm pissed by just kind of like,
What does that mean? Like smacking you around a little bit?
Oh my God.
Okay, because that's what I thought.
Well, that's rude. That's rude.
You mean that it could possibly like press on the accelerator a little bit more if I can play up the like being a jerk angle? Like,
no. I just meant like if I'm mad, like what a better way to make me not mad anymore.
There we go.
That's what I mean.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah, like,
And by the way, y'all just watched in real time like the difference between how men and women can like let me connect these dots. Wrong.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't stay mad at you. You're too cute.
Famous last words. So another basic tenet of the book is chapter 1, anatomy, no two alike.
Yeah.
So just talking about how like we all have the same stuff, men and women.
I did not know this. Like, I really didn't.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of one of those things where you can see how North and South America fit together with the coast of Africa, but without somebody going, yeah, they used to be connected. Like, it's just an assumption. Like, so, I can look at male and female parts and go like, these would be like equals in a lot of cases, but like, they're made out of the same stuff. We all have the same thing when we start out. And it either transforms into one or the other or both or something kind of in between. And now we see how that happens.
Yeah.
And that's, got to be a lot more common than people 100 years ago were thinking.
For sure.
But what was the like equivalent part that kind of surprised you the most?
I did not know that the balls...
I think you mean nutsack.
The scrotum skin is the same as your labia.
Yeah.
I did not know.
That's wild.
I didn't know. Interesting.
I hadn't put my finger on that. Haha. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at them both.
And it was really surprising, at least on the show. I know they had like a lot of this book is full of statistics. So if you're ever like kind of doubting what she says, because some of it's like, wow, really? She really does have some scientific evidence to back it up. And she'll kind of talk about the studies that are conducted and like when and, the variables in between and your actual numbers. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike, okay, so remember in The Highly Sensitive Person where she keeps on saying, you're like, oh, so Genghis Khan was a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
I'm like, would you fucking back that up? You know, like you don't
Oh,
know any of these people. Like you can't just declare that
he was just very
strangers
sensitive.
throughout history were highly sensitive.
He was just very sensitive and misunderstood.
Emily actually backs up this stuff immediately with, here's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Here's the research that shows
She
this.
said something at the very end that said, I'm going to tell you something, and you might not want to believe me, but I have the science, so it would be in your best interest to just take my advice. But I was kind of surprised at how few people knew all the parts of a woman's sexual anatomy. Mm-hmm. That was, so that's men and women.
And there's a big reason for that. And it's that, there hasn't been a lot of study on it.
Right.
And like we said, it was 2005 when the clitoris was finally like mapped out.
Right.
And I mean like imaged, to see like exactly how big is this part and, how far back or forward does it go or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. Well, this is,
I was really shocked.
That says to me that throughout medical history, men have gone like, nah, not right now. I don't really want to spend any money researching that right now because I have a headache.
Oh, there are people who could talk your ear off about this subject, but yeah, for sure. And it's gendered.
She also has a separate narrator come on to be the voice of the patriarchy.
Oh, yeah, he's funny.
Which is fucking hilarious. And one example of that is just the hardest I have laughed in a long time. Good Lord. Okay. So the next section. Oh, the dual control model.
That's what we just talked about.
Your sexual personality.
Yeah. So you also have people who are, I say people because I think a lot of this applies to a lot of different people.
It's intended for women, but it applies to lots of different people.
You have people who are spontaneously aroused and some people who are responsively aroused.
This is hugely important.
I never really thought about that, really.
I went from one to the other.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
And she spends a lot of time like assuming that guys are going to be 100% spontaneously aroused. Mm-hmm. And that because our style of arousal becomes, due to patriarchy, it becomes the default. There's something wrong with women.
Yeah.
We have to figure out a pill to fix women so that they can be spontaneously aroused. So talk about that.
Yeah. So she said that pretty much 50-50 women are spontaneously and responsively aroused.
Yeah, I think I'm responsive now.
Responsibly aroused.
Responsively aroused.
Yeah.
As much as or more than.
She also kind of talks about how, like, no one's really spontaneously aroused. Like, you're responding to something.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting take as well. But, like, for, purposes in our own mind, when you're just like, whoa, like, I'm ready. That would be like, you're just kind of out of nowhere. Or sometimes you're like, not a good time.
Mm-hmm. It could be, for a guy, it could be a dream. It could be coming out of REM sleep and there is no dream. It could be due to a hormone spike, like, we have higher testosterone levels first thing in the morning, and that can cause it. It doesn't mean that we're, like, mentally aroused. Yeah. Although guys can typically, like, well, it's hard, so let's go. I can get there.
Yeah. So, and then another big one she had was if you are the context of arousal, which at first was a little confusing. But then I was like, okay, like I'm picking up what you're putting down.
She spends a lot of time across several chapters talking about context and coming back to it and going, this is another reason why context is so important.
Right.
This area of your brain is why context is so important.
Yeah.
These organs don't work by themselves. Therefore, that's why context is really important. And what that means is she gives us the example of you're in a good mood and you're already pretty touchy with your partner and the mood is light and they tickle you.
Yeah.
Versus you're stressed out and like using a big sharp knife and chopping something that you have to pay a lot of attention to. You're already stressed, you're already in a shitty mood, and they come up behind you and tickle you. Like, just picture, like, that's irritating. So
I hate being tickled.
Yeah.
I think that's one of, you know what? That might be a break for me.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm, like, in the mood or, like, being, like, touchy and romantic and cute, and someone starts freaking tickling me, like, like I would, like, karate chop them.
Especially if some random person runs into the room and starts tickling you while you're in that state, you know?
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah. I will stop hiring people to do that.
But no.
So
yeah.
it doesn't have to be something that extreme. It can just be like, this, I'm in a stressful situation or I'm stressed out.
She even talked about, like, because she uses her students, because she describes herself not as a therapist, but a sex educator. So she has students as opposed to clients. But she does, like, follow a few of their stories throughout the book. And she talks about how one couple was like redoing their bathroom because the context of they had gone on vacation and they had some, intimate moments in a big bathtub. So they're like, we need this in our house.
And that was their kind of relate to that.
Like, and I was like, that's really cool. And that's also kind of sweet. I don't know. I just thought that was cute.
And kind of expensive, I got to say.
Yeah,
but, if you can afford it, totally worth it.
Yeah.
I've been looking at my shitty bathtub upstairs ever since I moved in going, I need to replace this thing right now.
Ooh.
And, the more I look at it, it's like it's going to be several grand and I'm not going to be able to use that bathroom for a while.
Oh, right.
It'll be off limits. And plus, let's say like we do it in the middle of cold weather or in the middle of July, like, that bathroom might be kind of open to the elements either way.
Yeah.
And totally uncomfortable. But the bathtub is essentially where I go from being too stressed out to have sex to being in the right mindset for having sex. So it's just funny that they mentioned the tub thing.
Oh, yeah, that one really seemed to resonate with you a lot.
Oh, yeah.
When we were kind of discussing off and on. I feel like we discussed a little bit more of this book, A, because we listened to a lot of it together, but B, there's some things like I'm not going to like say on this podcast, if you can believe it. There are a few things I'm not going to be mentioning on here. And I was like, I really want to, talk about this.
Yeah, normally when Amber starts talking to me about a book that we're reading, I'm like, you really got to save it for the podcast. And there was just really no way to do that this week. Like, it's in the middle of like the Christmas season being off.
Right.
Plus, we had 2 trips back to Alabama from Atlanta.
Right.
And so a lot of time in a car, sitting right next to each other, listening to this book. It only got like, it became a slog at one point because, and this is a me thing. This is not a book thing.
Yeah.
Just because I was going through so much. Like I've mentioned Jekyll on the podcast before. He was my 12-ish-year-old Dalmatian buddy who's been my companion ever since I was Amber's age. And I had to put him down the other day because he was experiencing what seemed like liver failure. And we had already back in October decided to put him down. My older son was like, nah, I'm not having that. You're not killing our dog just because he's become inconvenient. I'm like, that's not it.
Right.
And then we had to drive to Alabama right after going to see your parents to go say goodbye to a friend of mine in Birmingham who is in palliative care right now. Actually, they're pulling him off the ventilator today. So he, super heavy moment, but he may be gone by now already anyway. So glad I went to go say goodbye to him.
Yeah.
So on the way back from all of that,
Yeah.
and having some pretty large realizations thanks to the book, which, big realizations, super heavy, not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Just finding out more about yourself. But that was the only reason that I found any of the book a slog at all at any point, is because I was already kind of overwhelmed.
So I loved this book, of course, but there were definitely some things that I disagreed with. At some point in the beginning, they kind of talked about women with higher sex drives engaging in risky behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are people like that who do that, but there are a lot of men doing that too.
Name one album.
But, and nobody really thinks too much about it.
No, that's the boys will be boys.
Yeah,
mentality.
so I don't really like, any kind of connotation really that, having a sex drive is somehow dangerous. I will say, when they talk about context and they talk about trust and vulnerability, which kind of goes hand in hand with some of the emotionally focused therapy and hold me tight, which she does mention.
Mm-hmm.
Women wanting to trust their partner is not just, I feel needy, when I have sex with a guy.
Yeah.
It's you're wanting to trust your partner because that person could kill you.
Yep.
There's a very good chance that you are unsafe, and I don't know, that might totally slow down your sex drive a little bit.
That
I
could
don't
be
know.
The brakes.
So
will he murder me?
Right. So
the breaks of the day.
Having trust with that partner, even if it isn't someone you're in a totally committed relationship with, is obviously very important for women. And I just like that. I thought that was cool that she laid that out there as well.
Okay, so we're gonna get to the point where things might get a little bit heavier for a second, because this is a super duper important part of the book. Arousal, lubrication is not causation. So
Yeah.
she goes into defining what non-concordance is, and this is super important. And I feel like instead of doing the TLDR, male partners and guys in general need to read this part, especially politicians, especially doctors, especially police, especially everyone.
I was about to say, yeah, everybody.
But especially everyone.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about when we talk about non-concordance?
Yeah, that's a big word. It's a $5 word.
Yeah, it's $5.56 at this point. In this economy, $7. The idea that, let's say, you're trying to have sex and there is no natural lubrication. Does it mean you are not down to do the deed? No. Because our sex parts and our brains cannot always be in concordance.
Right.
They're not always going to work perfectly together. And in fact, the studies that they have done have shown that it's actually not most of the time.
Yeah.
This, here we go with the trigger warning-y part. So cut, earmuffs. That can also mean that rape victims, while they're being raped, might be wet.
Yeah.
Does that mean that they liked it? Does that mean that they actually wanted it?
Right.
No,
No. Yeah.
it does not.
Right.
And at this point, while we were listening in the car, I paused it and turned to Amber and said, 10% joking, 90% serious. So by this logic, the very first time I had sex, the time that I lost my virginity, and I'm doing air quotes around that because she goes in to describe how the concept of virginity even is pretty flawed. But I was like, by that logic, my first time, I wasn't just coerced, I was raped. So, and just because understanding is knowledge is power, what happened was I told her no twice. She did everything she could to try to get me hard. I did.
Yeah.
We then had sex because I'm like, well, I mean, I know I said no, but I'm hard now. We got finished, and I've told this part of the story before. I yelled at her. And I've always thought I'm the monster here. But what she did in response to being yelled at for coercing me was to tell me that, you know, I got hard, so clearly I wanted it. And that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that it was consensual. She made sure that I understood that it was consensual. And so listening to this book came to the realization, like, there was never consent. And what we had here was non-concordance, which is you have an 18-year-old boy who will get an erection at anything.
Right.
At anything. Right. And that doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that I actually wanted it, which I've always known. But I've never had somebody in a book say, like, hey, you're not crazy.
Yeah, because, you know, non-concordance can go with women or men. You know, there are times where you want to have sex and you can't. And then there are times where you don't want to and you can. You know, so, I mean, this is totally different, you know, totally the same.
The secret and the lesson here is that don't pay attention to what their bodies are saying. Pay attention to their words.
And why is that hard? People lie. I mean, everybody has been with someone who has lied to them.
Yep.
You know, if it's in a big way or a small way. I think most people have had their trust betrayed. So you're thinking your partner is lying to you.
Or playing some kind of game.
Yeah.
You know, like in some way, this is foreplay.
Right.
And that's dangerous. That's a pop culture thing.
Yeah.
To act like, you know, Scarlett O'Hara says she doesn't want it and is not interested. But in the next morning, wakes up with a big smile on her face, looking like an angel.
Right. Yeah. She talks a lot about how there is a huge misconception that women don't want sex, but once you have sex with them, they'll be into it. You know, they might say no, but they'll be into it. And I think a lot of men deal with this as well because, you know, there's pop culture out there saying men are always horny. They're just like waiting for you ladies to let them have sex with you. I
dealt with one recently that was pretty fucking sure that, you know, since
Why do you have to talk about me like that? We talked about
it. Wasn't you. Just thought since she was offering that I'd be right over, and you know, like there's some issues there. A, don't know you. B, don't find you attractive. C, kind of a lot of red flags.
So Adam,
so no, I will not be having sex with you right now.
But maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future, no. If you fucking behave yourself. No, not in the future.
Adam.
Definitely not now.
Adam got to feel like what it's like being a woman. So That's nice.
And I honestly appreciate every time that I'm put in a position like that where, like, okay, so what would a woman do in this case? A, be afraid.
I'm afraid now.
And B, have some grace.
What?
Just in terms of like, well, I'm not going to go over and murder this person right away.
Why not?
Because that's rash. Okay. But I can definitely plot and plan. Sorry, FBI.
No, I'm talking about men. Men who are sending like these just awful texts to women all the time, like, come here and let me like pee in your butt. Like, what? Sir.
This is an Arby's.
But
essentially this girl went through and did a very guy thing, which is like, I want you to fuck me. And then, no response for 10 minutes. And then it's like, all right, we're done. And then another 10 minutes go by and like, no, we're cool, but you do need to come over and fuck me because I'm real horny. And then, fuck you, bitch. Like, I'm not present for any of this conversation and I'm not paying attention, but I can look here and see all the fucking red flags going on.
Or like, me just being like, no thanks. And I would say this probably happens more often in person, just me just being like, no thanks. Well, you're ugly anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to have sex with me. So,
yeah.
You're the one. What is this?
And plus, you're ugly. Wait, hang on.
Oh, that makes it all better then. I would love to. Thank you so much.
I think I need to convince you that I'm not ugly and that I have the genitalia of an 18-year-old.
Look, I have been told horrible things about myself by men who look like they live under a couch cushion. Women, you are not ugly. Men, you're sometimes ugly. Like, there's definitely some ugly dudes out there.
Do better. Oh God, my long COVID is acting up.
I've told Adam this several times. All women are hot and beautiful.
Pretty much.
So whatever.
We're gonna attempt to move along.
Oh yeah,
we need to form here. Y'all remember that book that we were that book? That Nirvana book that we were just talking about. Sex Worth Wanting.
Yes.
Word.
So like step up your game, like
what's wrong with somebody, and first of all, she says that sex is not a drive. Which is like, okay, what do you mean? And it's really, she's just kind of rebranding the language.
Right. She says you won't die without having sex.
And yet every woman
technically true
knows a guy who has almost died from blue balls at one time or another. This is a very real medical issue that will cause our testicles to explode. This is not true. I'm sorry.
I would pay to see that.
That in itself is its own thing. But she talks about sex worth wanting, which can mean figuring out exactly what it is how come your partner's not enjoying what you're doing? Or are they really, and you just think that they're not? But in the case of one couple, it was that one person's accelerator happened very quickly. The other person's was very slow. And slowing the fast ones down, she was a fast woman.
She's fast.
Slowing this fast woman down to this virtuously slow male actually increased the quality of sex for her.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes like this slow, agonizing thing. It's made for a huge explosive orgasm.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure that these people would have just found that on their own.
Yeah, for sure.
This book is full of cool ideas.
And I think, I don't like, I've like laughed at this all the time. Like, I don't like the spice it up metaphor. But, you gotta try some different things. And trying different things within reason. I feel like when people say we gotta try some different things, people are just like just their mind goes to like just tying you up and spanking you with a whip. Like,
it goes straight to bondage.
Right. It's always like something like that. And like, that's definitely not it. I mean, Emily means trying different things, like different time of the day, different room, perhaps.
Go to a hotel.
Go to a hotel. Try building up throughout the day. Try denying yourself.
Take sex off of the table for a month.
Right, so that it's not an expectation and you're not pressured.
So, God, a bunch of people, I think, are about to experience relief at this suggestion that imagine, okay, so if you get stressed out about the idea of like, okay, we're supposed to have sex tonight, and I really hope that I am in the mood by then.
Right.
And when we get there, I really hope that I don't have a problem having an orgasm.
Right.
And when we get there, I really hope that I don't have a problem giving them an orgasm.
Right.
What if I'm too preoccupied with all of the things that I'm currently talking about? And also, what if I'm ugly? So instead, instead it's making space and it's making time. And it's like, let's start addressing some of these things before we ever get there. Right. But also, what if sex just is not an option?
Yeah.
And we're going to go through our day flirting as normal. And we have close cuddling at bedtime, or we might give each other massages, or we might take a bath in a huge tub together. And sex is not on the table. For any of that. We're just really going to have a nice time.
Yeah, you're just connecting.
We're just going to have a nice time and connect. And then you tell your sex therapist, like, I'm sorry, in the middle of our month-long break, we had sex. Mission accomplished, actually.
Exactly.
That's what you're supposed to do. Because worrying about sex and worrying about whether you're going to have an orgasm, worrying about whether you're going to be able to give an orgasm, all of those things kill sex.
Well, and I think also, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if she directly pointed this out, but like as a person who, I think you and I have talked about this on separate occasions, when you have a partner that's like, I promise we'll have sex tonight, and then they, as the more accelerated person we both are, then they, for whatever reason, I'm too stressed, I'm too tired, that disappointment and that rejection is really hard.
That physically hurts.
Yeah.
And I have been the giver and the recipient of that plenty of times.
Yeah.
Of course, I've also jumped through immeasurable hoops in order to, quote, deserve sex.
Right.
And that was fucking ridiculous. When you get to the finish line after jumping through all of these hoops and you still don't deserve sex, that fucking sucks.
And we've talked about this off air, so to speak, several times too. I mean, nobody deserves or doesn't deserve sex. That's like saying somebody doesn't deserve love.
Or air.
Right. I mean, that's
not a thing that you, quote, deserve.
Right.
So don't get that in your head. I'm saying that because that was the mindset at the time. I'm saying that because that was the assignment at the time.
Right. But putting expectations on your sex life, I just wanted to point out for both partners, even if you're on one end of the playing field, is you're kind of setting yourself up to fail in certain ways. So I loved the part about like, let's just not have any expectations. And even I have talked about this with Adam, like sometimes I just like making out with you. Like, like if that's it, then that's cool. I just enjoy you. I enjoy kissing you. So
right. And I don't have to be a fucking 17-year-old boy about it and like, try to push things farther.
Yeah.
or a 17-year-old girl for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like a very affectionate person. So like that one was also a good spot for me to read as well. Just like none of these physical, affectionate type things have to lead to anything. So also great part to keep in mind. One thing. Okay. So she talked about a couple of things that I think are more specific to women. The part about shame, the part about trauma, she just, kind of flat out says with her way of writing, statistically, women are abused and murdered and sexually assaulted by men in very vast numbers. So these are things that scientifically do pertain more to women, but definitely not, it doesn't not happen to men. But another thing she talked about was just kind of like media and creating the idea of you're beautiful as you are.
Yeah.
One part that I didn't like was she has her couples throughout that she's talking about, and she was talking about like, well, men don't really like pay attention to that stuff after you have the baby and after you age and after you gain weight or lose weight or however it may be, or things are sagging. I think men are horrible to women about these types of things. I think men treat their wives like they have to be in tip-top shape 24/7, and if they're not, they threaten to cheat on them or leave them, meanwhile, again, looking like they came out of a couch cushion. She's like, men don't even notice this stuff. Maybe that's true for some men, or maybe the men that are her students, which I'm glad that these types of men exist, but I don't think that's by large.
Same deal for me. Like, I didn't really care. I just wanted to know that they still loved me after having a child and still wanted to have sex with me.
Yeah. I mean,
which I kind of learned during this book that those two things do not equal each other.
Yeah. So,
honestly, big fucking surprise for me.
What?
That, like, you don't measure how good the relationship is by sticking your thermometer in her, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like that whether or not you're able to have good sex doesn't mean whether or not there's love.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and that happens, to women a lot. Like they, they'll talk about like how they're going to hook up with the back of house dishwasher guy, and it's like the best sex they've ever had. I mean...
And it doesn't have anything to do with love.
Exactly. I mean...
No matter how much they love clean dishes in the restaurant.
I personally really like a connection to my partner. I think that makes it better. And I think with time, you can just like know each other better and kind of, it's easier personally.
Plus, I mean, if I know how to make you come, then I know how to make you come.
Right.
Like it's not going to be some stupid exploratory, like, I'm sorry I keep doing that. That's what my ex liked.
Oh my God. Right. So yeah.
All right. So but last week we forgot to cover our sponsor of the week.
Oh my God.
So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll wrap up on this book. This week's episode is brought to us by Joshua Tree Coffee Company, the only coffee made from real Joshua trees. For those Joshua vibes and desert tastes, wake up with a hot cup of Josh.
You're so ridiculous.
It you very much.
Yes, that was real. Please believe.
Keeping it real. So, normally we ask like, what's going to be like your, two or three things that you actually use from this book.
I cried so much reading this book, straight up.
Tell me about that.
Okay. So there are times, like I said earlier, where, like I felt abnormal. And granted, I don't feel not abnormal. Sometimes there were definitely points where I was like, the culturally standard sexual function is also exists.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, it definitely happens. Like, so
concordance happens.
Right. So sometimes there is certain things that are culturally normal that still work for you. And that kind of makes you feel a little othered. But
I think in trying to make sure that the non-concordant people don't feel like aliens.
Right.
She made the concordant people feel a little funny about
Yeah.
the fact that their bodies and their
Yeah,
minds.
I mean,
line
because
up
it's
there.
just like, okay, well, what's the deal with me then?
No, no one is ever concordant.
So
What are you, some kind of breeder?
But I definitely felt less alone. Definitely felt more celebratory of who I am and my sexuality, especially as I'm getting older. And I, like she had like a challenge, which is actually on the show as well, for you to look in the mirror and list off things you like. She says, get naked as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually naked.
I have already. I'm just thinking back to a few months ago when I lost this challenge.
Yeah.
Like I was having like a really bad depressive episode.
Yeah.
I was in a hotel, opened the shower curtain, saw my entire naked body and went, fucking hate that guy. And then that was a voice. And then
Right.
immediately like I was like, hey, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm just doing what I do here. I just had a good night. But
Yeah.
she wants you to. This is going to be very, very
Because you
difficult.
deserve love and you deserve pleasure as you are. Not,
It's a gratitude
Right.
exercise.
Yeah.
So we are, because of media, we're used to critique. We're used to finding the differences. We're used to spotting the differences, pointing them out. And like, my stomach is not like this actress. My cock doesn't look like that guy's in this porn that I'm watching. And to be able to just like look at yourself in the mirror and start to kind of list off like the things that you like. And day one of this exercise,
I was like, nothing.
it might be nothing.
I was just like, nothing.
Absolutely nothing. And
Yeah.
it might be nothing that first day. It might be nothing that first
Yeah,
time.
and like we even had like a conversation about this. She talked about how women are kind of conditioned by one another to hate on yourself by, no one's going to brunch with their girlfriends talking about how I feel beautiful. And I'm like, wait a minute. Me and my girlfriends will walk up to brunch or whatever we're doing, be like, I feel gorgeous. I feel hot as hell. We turn around. Yes, queen, you are hot as hell. You look amazing. Dump that guy.
So I looked Emily up, partly because her voice is super hot, but I looked her up and she's a year older than me.
Oh.
And as I said to you about this, like when we just kind of brushed past this
Yeah.
idea before, I was like, you're talking about the cultural shift that happened between your age and hers. And there it is right there. Is
Right.
that like people that are my age didn't do that.
Yeah.
Women my age would meet up for lunch and attempt to compliment each other and immediately tear themselves down.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah.
And then everybody tears themselves down a little bit
oh
so
my
that
God.
we're all on the same
Yeah.
page.
You're like, oh, you look so cute. And it's like, oh my God, I haven't slept in a week. Like, I just
This
feel...
old thing.
Yeah. So watch yourself when you're doing those things. I'm not saying like flog you and your friends, but like watch yourself when you're doing those things. Think about how good it feels whenever your friend accepts a compliment from you.
Yeah.
Like when I'm like, oh my God, you look so beautiful. You're glowing. Your skin looks great. When they say thank you, or I've been using this new thing, or, just whatever, that makes me feel good. And so think about that whenever you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Accept your own compliments.
Try to look at yourself in the mirror once a day. Find something that you like and compliment yourself. And, like for example, like, this is going to be typical Adam thinking here. So in this past year, I worked out a lot, did a really good job of getting my weight down to something that I felt was more healthy and comfortable, and I felt really good. And then I got COVID again, and it set in action some metabolic shift, which I'm still trying to counteract, and I gained 10 pounds a month, 2 months in a row. That being said, my hair looks fucking great.
You always look great. I mean, of course, like, I'm not going to sit there and argue with you when you're looking at a number, but you always look great to me. It doesn't matter how much weight you've gained or lost.
You always look great to me.
Well, thank you.
And I've been trying to make sure that I told you so more lately.
Yeah, I think like
Not
one of
to
my
butter you up, but because it's important.
Well, but I also think like reassurance is great. I think one of my accelerators in bed is being desired and being complimented. You know, my love languages are word and touch. So I think my breaks are feeling inadequate with myself. So, you know, you're
And
just
words could kind of cast a spell that gets rid of that mist.
right. So I think you're just acting in concordant with how you're feeling and also with how my brain works in its terrible sometimes way.
So, gosh, I love this book, and I think that you should read it.
Right. If you don't read any this season, I think this is a good one to pick up and read with your partner, read with your friends,
and tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
Honestly. All right, Amber, you want to give us the socials and
Yes.
an update on maybe where folks could find Emily, where they can find this book, and where they can find us.
So, Emily is on Instagram. She shares a lot of really cool graphics about, you know, her work as a sex educator. She's Nagoski. She also has a podcast called Come As You Are. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can totally listen to that one. That podcast is really cool. It seems like she answers like a lot of like kind of ask Emily type questions. She says as a sex educator, she gets a lot of sex questions. So I'm glad she loves the work she does.
She's doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, so that podcast is super educational. Our handle is at checking.in.podcast. That's our Instagram. So we have a book list with Bookish in our link tree, and this book is on that list. So you can order it and it will directly benefit Bookish.
Who are Bookish are sweet people.
Yeah.
Like, I just love them.
Oh, yeah.
And we go into Bookish every once in a while just to ask for their recommendations.
Oh, and she always has like some great things to pull.
She really does. It's like she sits around thinking about books all the time.
Right. She's doing the right job for her soul, it seems like, as well.
It really does. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Do we have any idea what we're going to do next week? Or
Adam had said previously he wanted to maybe cover books that are geared towards women. This book is geared towards women, but he found a lot in it. The next book is Why Does He Do That? So this is a book that is probably going to be pretty triggering, definitely towards men heteronormative relationships. A lot of my friends have read and recommended this book to me. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going to be work, though.
Right.
All right. Thank you, folks. We'll see y'all next week.